And the moment that an individual feels threatened, he will put up his defense mechanism, which in our case is anger. And not just anger, the type of anger that is not justified. So if a true person, a person who is able to remove this unnecessary love, when he's challenged in a gathering, he doesn't get angry. He doesn't get upset. Why?
It's not his goal.
It was never his goal to be the head, to be in charge of the gathering or to be the focal point in the first place. That's not what he wanted. So when someone else challenges, not just that, for some people when they're challenged, what actually happens?
They get excited.
They get excited. Why do they get excited?
They want to see that person have a reaction.
Well, that's a troll, right?
Yeah.
But I say, what are like, we're assuming the person's sincere.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Sorry, I thought
So the person who is sincere, why would they be happy? Not they want to prove themselves. I'm sorry. Okay, it's room for them to improve, right? Because what this person is bringing is what? It's new information. And now that this new information is coming, it's making him excited because he's like, man, I'm adding to my knowledge base. And that's important. And that's where we should be. If somebody's bringing information, learn to engage the information, not the person. So it doesn't concern him. Like this individual is so humble, it doesn't matter. He doesn't care where he sits. It doesn't matter who he's with. Because this humility will follow him wherever he or she goes. And this is something that is really important. It's lost, unfortunately, for many of us. That we are above any of these things. We're above helping. We're above sitting certain gatherings. We're above being around certain people. And this is where we really need to check and look at our intention. Does this mean that I should sit with people who waste my time? No. Why am I not sitting with them? Because I feel I'm better than them?
No.
No. It's because what? It's a waste of time, right? It's not a good use of my time. It's not about not being better. But this means I can still give them salam. It still means I can still associate with them. It still means that I can still be good to them. And even if somebody sat above him, he does not anger. What Ghazāli is doing here, he's actually giving us personal litmus gauges. If we are in these situations and we feel these things, what does that tell me? Where I have a problem. I have an issue. I need to work on myself. There's something wrong. And what is one of the best ilaj, one of the best things that he had mentioned previously? If I feel like I need to be the center of attention, in the center of the gathering, or I do all of this, and I do all that, what is one very quick and easy thing that I can do? Okay, acknowledging is important. And how can I act on it?
Do some low work,
Okay, doing lower work, even easier than that. Just shut up. Just stop talking. Right? If I feel this need, because how do I gain fame? How do I become the center of attention? How do I all these things? By talking, right? Like just by talking. And if I want to control myself, one of the best things for me to do is actually restrain myself and stop. So he's complaining. So Ghazāli complains here. He said that these terrible habits have become rampant, and these are things that are found amongst so many people. And this love of these unnecessary things, it actually fuels the anger that many of us hold on to. And this becomes a shortcoming. This becomes a shortcoming because of this love of this thing. We anger over this thing. This becomes the thing that we desire, and this creates this negative feedback loop. And we just become angrier, we increase in our desires, and this person, he makes a very interesting point here. He said that he will forever chase his desires, only finding sadness and misery. And I want to touch on this point. Why? How can this person who chases desires only find sadness and misery? Where is happiness? Happiness is in the heart. How do I achieve happiness? Pleasing Allah is one way. Absolutely.
So the intent is not here, therefore you're not going to get.
Sorry. Well, not just that. I agree with you. You're right. The intent isn't here. But what is happening? Why? I'm sorry? They'll never be fulfilled. That's excellent. That true fulfillment is not here. Where's true fulfillment? True fulfillment is here. It's inside. If I want to be happy, what do I need to do? I need to learn how to be satisfied. I need to learn how to be grateful. Right? These are all tools that are fundamental that we need to have. If I truly want to be happy, I cannot keep looking for outside inputs. Why? It's not realistic. It's not sustainable. Right? These things are not sustainable. Because once I reach that, right? For example, man, I really want a nice car. So I get a nice car. What happens? I see a nicer car, right? And then what happens?
Even a nice one.
Then I see a boat, right? After I see the boat, I see what? I see a plane. You know what I mean? I get a bigger house. Is there an end to the dunya? Absolutely not. There's no end. And if I'm not happy, and if I'm not grateful with what I have, this doesn't mean, again, that we don't keep a high standard. Right? This is important. It doesn't mean that I should never achieve more. It doesn't mean I shouldn't work harder. It doesn't mean that I should better myself. Right? It doesn't mean any of those things. But in this moment, I should be what? I should be grateful. In this moment, I need to be grateful. In this moment, I need to be thankful. It is in this moment that I should be fulfilled with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me and given. This is what's important. And this is why we can't look to the dunya. We can't look to others. We can't even look to our spouses to make us happy. Because happiness is within. If I'm not happy, nothing is going to make me happy. And even if I am happy, the happiness is what? It's very fleeting. It's going to be very temporary. It's going to be for that moment. And again, this is not sustainable. It's not. Because what happens? I keep working, I keep pushing, I keep going, I grow, I get up the ladder, I make more money, I'm buying more things. What happens? What happens in the end?
Not happy.
Why? But why?
Because you didn't focus.
Unsatiable.
Because it's unsatiable. Like I get to like 65, 70 years old, and I've worked, and I just keep amassing all of these things, and I keep looking for the next thing. And at 70, what happens? Or at 65, what happens? Why? What happens?
You realize you wasted a lot of time.
Okay, okay. Like, what happens at that point? Like, where's the breaking point? What happens?
A sad realization that it was all for nothing.
Right? The realization that these things, they have, you've gotten all of these things, but they have no value. And you look around at that point, and who's around you? No one. You're alone. And that's why it only increases in sadness and misery. So, for those who are looking to get married, my personal advice, marry as young as you can. Because marriage is not going to stop you from getting dunya. It won't. And I can tell you that because I was like super broke when I got married. Marriage does not stop you. It'll adjust some of your goals. I'm not going to lie to you. There'll definitely be adjustments that an individual has to make, but it's not going to stop you from succeeding. Anything that you seek, you will continue to be able to seek, and probably even more fulfilling when you're married.
Agree.
This is important. Like, don't think, I'm going to wait until X age until I get married, or I'm going to wait. I need to do this before I get married. No, you can do that and get married. Marriage is not an obstacle. It's not. Marriage should be synergistic, right? It should empower you to do these things. It should be fulfilling. It should, you know what I mean? It'll bring focus to your life. It'll bring purpose. Like it brings, I won't say purpose, but it'll bring focus for sure. It'll help us develop, and it helps us understand what it feels like to be responsible for someone else. And this is something that's important. So please, for those of you, don't put it off. I highly, highly, highly discourage anyone from putting off marriage. So you just lead this life of sadness and misery. Right? This is something that needs to be disdained. So bad habits leads to evil company. And in evil company, you will have people say like, oh man, he doesn't gamble well, or he doesn't play well, he doesn't hold his alcohol down. These are, I'm sure, he doesn't eat well, like you need to eat more. These are things that I'm sure all of us have heard in one setting or one gathering or another. Why? Because bad habits create bad company. Angering over such things is unnecessary, as loving them is. And it should be that easy to step away from. And it should be that easy to walk away from. So the last category that Ghazāli mentions is that there are some things that are necessary for some people. Right? Who are those people? So books for a scholar. Right? Can he be a scholar without books? No, it's not possible. Or a carpenter without his tools. Can he be a carpenter? Can he seek a sustenance? You know what I mean? Or being a taxi driver without a car. Is it possible? Right? You know, you can't. Like, these are things that are necessary for that individual. So, does a scholar need carpenter tools? No, absolutely not. Right? This is something that would be unnecessary for him. It has to be appropriate to the person because it is necessary for their sustenance. And we had said that those things that are required for an individual sustenance, loving them is necessary. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, whoever among you wakes up in the morning, secured in his dwelling, healthy in his body, having food for the day, then it is as if the world has been gathered for Allah. Like I said, this is amazing. It's amazing. You know, and he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when do you think he said this? When he himself was what? He was like joy, and he was like, you know what I mean? Like he was always in hunger. He was in difficult situations. Even Umar radiallahu anhu, when he came to him, he would see the marks of the mat on his face where he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He had no luxurious life, and in any way, shape, or form. And the sacrifices that he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made. And you know, you wouldn't imagine that a person like this would make such a happy statement. You would never imagine a person like this would make such an inspiring statement. You would never imagine that such an individual would be so forthcoming and such a source of light and happiness when they themselves are living in such a state. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so whoever has this realization, right? You know, if we actually come to this realization of the things that are necessary, and we come to the realization of the things that we need, and we come to the realization of the things that we are actually supposed to do, it helps really organize our life and bring that sense of qana and bring that sense of content. And that's something that we should all work as hard as we can for. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. So he brings different strategies. He says, okay, there are different strategies in order to take care of these different types of love. So for necessary, he says, exercise here will be more focused on not letting anger consume you. So he's saying that you'll still get what? You'll still get angry, but don't let the anger consume you. You have to learn how to channel. You have to learn how to channel this anger appropriately. So a good exercise in this is, for example, if someone tries to break into my home, what is a good response? Huh? Right? You know what I mean? Like cut their head off, right? So the thing is, you have every right to defend yourself, right? Because it's a stranger. And if a stranger is willing to violate your personal boundaries, we have no idea to what extent this person is going to go. Absolutely. And I agree with that. But does it make sense to use a missile launcher to completely obliterate it? Yeah, you understand? And the thing is, like, okay, an individual might use a weapon to defend themselves, and they have every right to do that. But, you know, does it make sense now to shoot this guy like 17 times? No. You know what I mean? Like, but what is it enough in some situations where he can hear you, but he can't see you, and you tell him, like, listen, you better get out, otherwise you're going to get shot. Right? These are, you know what I mean? Or like, after he's down on the ground, you know, you just keep, you know what I mean? Like, this is not healthy, right? None of these things are healthy, and it's important for us to understand how to channel our anger. That it's completely fine to be angry in those situations, but even a muted response, right? You have different levels of response. And when we get angry, it doesn't matter how loud we are or how muted we are. Okay. Alright, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Just continuing, so disciplining strategies for the three types of love. The first one, where we said necessary, what the thing that's very important is making sure that the anger is being channeled appropriately, and that we are not using it in a way that it is consuming us, and making sure that, you know, but here, again, he is not negating what? That you won't get angry, right? He's completely okay with the anger, saying that anger is something that's normal, is something that is completely acceptable. Also, one does this by practicing forbearance and tolerance. And this goes back to the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "Al-ilm bita'allum wa hilm bitahallum." He said that knowledge is by seeking it, and forbearance is by practicing it, right? And the only way that you can achieve or get a characteristic is by actively practicing that characteristic. So even if I don't have it, then what can I do? I can keep practicing it. I can keep practicing it until it actually becomes a personal characteristic. As for removing rage altogether, then he says that this is something that's impossible. Also, it is possible to break its violent urges and to weaken it, meaning that if I have this uncontrollable rage, what I can actually do is I can break it down, right? And by breaking it down, what happens is that it doesn't consume me, right? It still exists, but it doesn't actually consume me, and I can channel it in a reasonable way. And it might not physically manifest, and it is extremely challenging, but he's saying that it still can be done. And this is something that, again, that is very important. And we had talked about this before. Just because I'm angry, just because I'm in a fit of rage, it doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to express my anger. And what's interesting about anger is that regardless of how angry I am, as long as I express it in some way, shape, or form, right? So even if somebody violates my space, if somebody insults me, and I tell them something as simple as, you can't talk to me like that, right? This might not be an equivalent response. Someone might curse me, they might curse my parents, they might curse my family, et cetera, and they might keep going. And the only thing I say to them is that, hey, you can't talk to me like that. I'm angry, and I might even be furious inside based on what this person is telling me. Got it. Thank you. All right. Somebody ain't my class, dude. So, and it's important to understand that, like, if you are in a situation, it's important for us to understand what is an appropriate response when we are in angry situations. So if someone is, someone steals from me, I don't, have you guys ever gotten pickpocketed before? Yeah. Yeah. Somebody stole your jacket. Well, I mean, that's kind of, were you wearing it?
No, I was playing basketball.
Oh, you're okay. So like, I remember I got onto a bus one time and I felt someone go like this. And like a few seconds later, I realized, like, oh man, somebody just got my phone. I got out of the bus. I saw two guys running away. So I chased I chased after them. So I chased after them. They split up. I went down the alley to catch one, and he was like, what do you want? And like, I checked his pockets. He didn't have anything. So I chased after the other guy. The other guy had jumped onto another bus. Right? And there are different ways to manifest your anger. After that, the way that I had expressed my anger, what do you think happened with me? You feel remorse, right? You feel remorse, like, dang, man, like, I let my anger consume me, versus allowing a little bit of anger out, versus saying that, Like, man, like you took my wallet, and like that really, because the thing is, when there's a difference between stealing and extortion. You guys know extortion and stealing? So extortion is like forcing, right? Walking in like, hey, you need to give me this much money. In Islam, there's a punishment for stealing. What is the punishment for extortion? Yeah, it's like a debt. You have to pay the money back. Okay, how come it's not the same as stealing? Extortion's okay?
I think the premise is that you're in need of stealing.
No, not necessarily.
You don't cause too much, you don't
Right.
hurt much.
So the harm is there with both, because the threshold for stealing is actually very low, right? So for an individual's hand to be cut for stealing, the threshold is very low. It's not actually that high. But extortion, even if I go and extort, like I go and extort a business owner and I tell them like, hey, you need to pay protection money. Over here, the difference is, and Allah knows best. I mean, there are a number of differences between the two scenarios, is that in stealing, do I know who's taking the money from me? I usually don't, right? And when I don't know, this creates a sense of mistrust in the community. So even in a neighborhood, if you know that one house gets robbed, what happens? The whole neighborhood gets scared, right? Versus a person who's extorting, who's he extorting from? Probably the entire neighborhood, right? So it's not like and you know exactly who's taking your money. Yeah, the IRS has been, what, 87,000 new agents, would you say? No, I'm saying, so anyway, like, so rage, we have to make sure that it's completely okay to manifest rage, and don't feel like we shouldn't feel that we need to manifest. Our reaction doesn't need to be according to what we're feeling. Does that make sense? Like, just because I'm feeling here, it doesn't mean that my release needs to be here, right? Because even if I release here, then it's completely fine. And we will find later that we actually have less remorse because the response was more controlled. And he says the same would apply to the third type of love. Why? So the same strategy, he said, it would apply to the third type of love. Why? Because it is still necessary, right? Like, these are things that are necessary. That's why it's still okay. So over here, the goal should be to remove the pain associated with that anger when he attempts to show forbearance. So that this pain that he's talking about, it's not a pain in like the physical sense. It's more like that pulling at the heart. You guys know, so like when we get angry, and I'm sorry, I'm getting like really abstract, but when we get angry, there's something that pushes that anger. Like that flame that kind of pushes that anger. So that flame that pushes that anger is the pain that Ghazāli is talking about here. So when you have that pain and that thing is pushing you, the goal is that, okay, I shouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to that flame, right? I shouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to that heat. I need to make sure that I am able to contain it, and I'm able to control it, and I'm able to manifest it in a reasonable way. So unnecessary. So he says it's completely possible to control and remove from the heart using some of the following reminders. So he says there's a different technique for unnecessary, because unnecessary is something that we should already be removing our love from anyway. He says his end residing will be the grave, reminding ourselves that we're going to die, so that the connection to fame, the connection to wealth, the connection to status, the need to be the center of attention, all of these things will disappear the day that we die. Because the day that we are buried, what happens to the world? Huh? The world's over?
I mean, it's over.
It's over for me, but what happens to the rest of the world? It goes on. So how important was I? Not really, right? The world goes on. The moment an individual dies, payments still need to be made. People still need to get places. People still need to go to work. Electricity still needs to run. Water still needs to get where it needs to go. What I mean? Like, nothing stops. And it doesn't matter how important the person is. Things need to go on. The goal should be the afterlife. And if we understand the goal is the afterlife, why are we even spending time preserving and protecting and loving the necessary things then? What's the difference?
Those actually affect the afterlife. So
Okay.
actually, we don't commit any bad sins.
Okay. Huh. What? Okay. Here, even why can't the same argument be made for necessary things? Without those things, what's going to happen? I'm going to die, right? Like I will destroy myself. Like I will physically destroy myself. Like without food, without shelter, without clothing, I will actually destroy myself. And that is the problem.
right? That is the main issue. And if I understand that I'm going to destroy myself, it removes this purpose. It removes this purpose altogether. This world is temporary. Again, something that we all understand, that this world is temporary. All of the things that are in it, they are going to disappear one day. So I know for sure I'm going to die, but I also know for sure that what? This world is going to end and it's going to perish. Anything beyond that is cursed. So anything beyond this need, anything beyond these necessary things is cursed. Why? And why does he call it cursed? Basically, for Ghazāli, anything that distracts you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be what? Not just unnecessary, it's going to be something that's cursed because it takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be abstinent concerning this world and erase the love of it from your hearts. And again, when he talks about the things of this world, he defined them very clearly. What were those things? Fame, status, wealth. Right? These things need to be removed from the heart. If an individual had a dog that he did not love, he wouldn't get upset if someone else kicked it. I don't know why he gave this example. I was like, man, I don't know, maybe because I didn't really like dogs. No, he kicked my dog, right? So love and anger are forever intertwined. If one reaches the end of disciplining his anger, at this stage, it will end in the restrainment of the essence of anger. So even if you reach the end and you do the best you can, and you reach this end point where you've managed to discipline your love, you've managed to discipline your anger, he's saying that even this doesn't really happen. It's exceptionally rare that you have an individual who's actually able to reach this point. It's just because the problem is that there are people, it's very easy to overshoot. And when you overshoot, you become careless, right? Like, and I don't mean careless in the sense like, I mean in the sense that, things no longer anger you. And we said that this was the other extreme, and this was extremely problematic. So there's some counter arguments that he brings. He says here, like, does all dislike things lead to anger? So for example, if I have a sheep and I'm reliant on that sheep and the sheep dies, who am I going to get angry at? Right? There's no one really I can get angry at that point. He also says, okay, like, well, I tolerate surgical procedures even though they hurt. I tolerate hijama even though they hurt, but I don't get mad at the surgeon. So this is kind of the argument that he's building here. Like, I don't have there's no place for me to direct my anger in those situations. And not only do I not anger, I tolerate those things. Why do I tolerate them? Because of the outcome. He says here that if we understand that if this is done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and that this is part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's divine decree, it actually helps him create this, like putting things in context. It helps him put a lot of these different ideas, helps him put a lot of these different situations in context, and it helps him deal with a lot of the calamities that he will deal with. So his anger will be suppressed with his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is very important. And his good thoughts are with Allah, meaning that anything that happens to him, why is it happening? For his betterment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not prescribe anything except that which is good for him, even in his sickness, even in his hunger, even in his wounds, even in his death. This individual will not anger because he understands the overall benefit. And this is what's important. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's intention for the person. And how do we know Allah's intention? When we have good thoughts of Allah and we hope from him and we love him azza wa jal. So he's saying that it's not impossible. This overwhelming belief is similar to a burst of lightning. So this person might be in that state, but how long is he going to be in that state? For like a really short time. And then what's going to happen right after it? Right? He's going to remember exactly what he was dealing with in the situation that he was in. And he said, if it was possible for a person to always be in the state, the most deserving person of it would be who? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would get angry. Even he would anger. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he says about himself, this is the Prophet ﷺ speaking about himself. He said, oh Allah, I am a human being and I anger just like others. For any person amongst the Muslims upon whom I hurl a malediction or invoke a curse or give him whipping, make it a source of purity and mercy for them on the day of judgment. And this is when he carries out punishments. There's a hadith of Muawiyah, very famous. Do you guys know? The Prophet ﷺ, he called for him and Muawiyah didn't come. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He made dua against him. What did he say? It's like, may Allah not fill his stomach. So over here, this gives us a little bit of context, and it helps us understand that even when he sallallahu alaihi wasallam says things about the companions, that it is for their betterment and for their benefit. Interestingly enough, Muawiyah was a very big guy. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he said that he used to write everything he heard from the Prophet ﷺ, but the Qurayshis, they said to him, stop writing. The Prophet ﷺ, sometimes he gets mad, sometimes he's happy. Why do you write down everything that he says? The Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, continue writing, because everything that comes from this tongue is the truth. Aisha radiallahu anha, she reported that she came to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and she was feeling jealous. And the Prophet ﷺ, he felt this. He felt that she was upset. She felt that it was angry. So the Prophet ﷺ said, it was your devil who had come to you. And he was the one who was invoking you. So she said, oh Allah's Messenger, is there along with me a devil? He said, yes. And she said, is there a devil attached to everyone? He said, yes. And then she said, even you, Ya Rasulullah. I mean, look at the adab. Look at the mannerism of how she's dealing with her husband, dealing with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, he said, yes, but my Lord has helped me against him, and as such, I am absolutely safe from his mischief. His other wives. Ali radiallahu anhu said that the Prophet ﷺ never angered for a worldly reason, but when he did, it was for the truth, and we would not recognize him. He would be so angry that he would change his complete character. Nothing would stop him until he righted the wrong. And this is in Shama'il al-Tirmidhi. He would anger for the truth, anything that would harm an individual's sustenance or his religion. This would be considered being angry for Allah. And this is something that it is important. It is something that we should all have, and something that we should be proud of when we anger. If somebody curses Allah Azza wa Jal, we should be angry. Somebody curses the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Somebody makes fun of part of the religion or part of the deen. That feeling that we have is completely justified. It's important, and we should have it, and it's a sign of Iman. Sometimes we overlook anger. So there might be something that happens and that we normally get angry at, but we overlook at why, because we're angry at something else, right? And our heart it's like it's a container. It can only take so much, right? There's only so much emotion that can be put into a heart. So he mentions this is because a lot of companions and a lot of tabi'een, they use this actually as a strategy. They use this as a means to overcome some of their anger. So over here, when Salman was cursed, he said, if my scales are light, then if somebody cursed him, he would say and respond, if my scales are light, then I'm worse than what you claim. And if they are heavy, then what you say has no effect. Again, he's looking at the consequences in the afterlife versus dealing with the person at hand. Rabi' ibn Khaytham, he was cursed. He said, oh, if Allah has heard what you said, and if my path is paradise, then you are no obstacle. And if it is not, then I'm worse than what you claim. When Abu Bakr was cursed, he said, if only I had hidden your defects. And he, radiallahu anhu, was speaking about himself. And again, this distraction is a method, it's a technique that can be used to help overcome anger. A woman said to Malik ibn Dinar, you show off. He replied, no one has truly known me except you. And he took it as a moment to introspect and to really look into his heart and to make sure if he was a mura'i, making someone who fallen into riyah. A man cursed Sha'bi, so he said, if you are correct, may Allah forgive me, and if you are lying, may Allah forgive you. And all of these narrations indicate that these people, they didn't anger because they distracted themselves. They had different goals. They had different outlooks. They didn't focus at the person at hand. And this is, again, this is a very reasonable technique to help deal with some of this anger. We have to busy ourselves with those things that will bring betterment. We have to busy ourselves and take away from those things that will take us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, focus on issues that are more important. This is one strategy. Knowing that in everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. This is another strategy. Knowing that Allah loves those who do not enrage, who do not, again, not enrage, not anger, but not enrage, meaning that they allow their anger to consume them. This love should put out the fires of rage, and this is a real possibility in some situations. So he said the true way to remove the tempest of anger is by removing love of the world from our hearts. Right? And this is, it's very challenging. Right? It's really difficult. And this comes by understanding its shortcomings and follies, which will be discussed in the book of Disparagement of Worldly Affairs. And whoever is able to remove level of worldly benefits from his heart will have control over many reasons to anger. Whatever is unable to be erased from this love, then it's possible to break and weaken it, which in turn will weaken his anger, disparage acting on it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his blessing out of his softness and generosity, for he is capable of all, and all praise is due to Allah alone. Wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions?